The MM+M Media Summit returns to New York City on October 30th. Top voices in health media and pharma marketing will share what's working now and what's coming next. On the agenda, AI, retail media, personalization at scale, streaming, and the expanding definition of the point of care. We're talking strategy, consumer trust, and data privacy. What matters, what's moving, and what it means for you. Register at MMM-MediaSummit.com. Use promo code PODCAST to save $100.
If my conversations with leaders across the industry are any indication, there are two topics medical marketers can't get enough of: GLP-1s and the crackdown on DTC pharma ads. Don't worry, AI is in there too, but you already knew that. Luckily for you, this week's episode of the MM+M Podcast delves into what happens when patients stop taking GLP-1s, as well as how the first week of the Trump administration's enhanced enforcement of restrictions on DTC pharma ads has gone thus far. To start this episode, reporter Hire Rikraj brings us a conversation with Dr. Innocent Clement, CEO and founder of Ciba Health. He talks about what happens when people stop taking these powerful, life-changing drugs, as well as what medical marketers can do to fill the education gap. And for our trend segment, we analyze the Trump administration's proposed crackdown on DTC pharma ads and how an ad for AstraZeneca's at-home flu vaccine led to a warning letter from the FDA. And important to note, our conversation took place before the FDA released the other 99 warning letters, which we're pouring through as we speak. Check out MM+M's website for more coverage of this ongoing development. I'm Managing Editor Jack O'Brien, and this is the MM+M Podcast.
Today we have a really exciting guest. We have Dr. Innocent Clement, who is the founder and CEO of Ciba Health, here with us today to talk about GLP-1s, everyone's favorite topic. It's a huge part of the pharma industry. It's growing as well. And there's just a lot of conversation that has yet to be kind of done around GLP-1s, a lot of opportunity for marketers. But before we get into kind of all of it, I just wanted to introduce Dr. Clement and ask him about Ciba Health. So Dr. Clement, if you could, give a brief background on yourself and talk a little bit about what you do at Ciba Health.
Absolutely. Again, thank you for the opportunity to connect with you and then chat about obviously some of the challenges in the industry, the innovations happening in the space today. At Ciba Health, we've built what I call precision digital healthcare platform that is focused on helping people who are actually either to prevent, manage, and to really even reverse chronic condition. And really what makes the difference is that we bring in medical component of how healthcare is delivered. We bring in nutritional, behavior, all this care together in one place, and then supported by connected devices, wearables, AI-driven analytics. That, means we can identify high-risk patients and really early support them holistically and deliver measurable outcomes for either employer, payer, or individuals. And Ciba Health really started in 2020 to address a lot of those challenges in terms of how members access their care, how care is delivered, mostly patients with what I call polychronic complex chronic conditions, which means a member who had 2 or 3 or more chronic conditions struggling with how they manage that with really multiple apps today. And Ciba is addressing that by providing a platform that provides re-stratification to allow members to access care, same care team, and provide this whole person personalized care model.
That's awesome. Yeah, thanks for giving that brief description. And, I was taking a look at some of the programs that you guys have on Ciba Health, and based on a conversation we had prior to this podcast recording, we were talking about GLP-1s and the obesity space. And I know Ciba Health has a GLP-1 step-down program. Could you talk a little bit more about what the program is and what it aims to do?
Absolutely. When you look at the space today, there's a few challenges, right, facing either pharma and then as well as really the GLP medication that everyone thinks it's the magic bullet, right? But employers and payers are struggling with the cost and sustainability of some of this GLP. And so as a result of that, Ciba had built a solution that's called step-down therapy. So step-down therapy is, what it does is to help members who are seeking a GLP to be able to go through prior authorization and really to identify what pathway that would probably be most suitable for them, right? So because of the cost and also the sustainability of that, the step-down therapy helps employer, payer, one, to optimize, but to also help to reduce costs associated with this. And, we're not just prescribing medication just because people want a quick fix. We want to be able to provide alternative to those who are seeking that. And if we see that they're not getting better or they're not improving, we'll be able to combine the GLP as well as, the step therapy, one that can also allow for better, what I call medication titration, but also really the microdosing element, which is something that is still missing in one of the missing puzzles there. And then there's what we call the step down, where those who are already on the GLP today, how do you support those who probably are experiencing a lot of this, what I call the side effects of this medication? That could be GI issues, could be other, what I call the symptoms that they experience with that. So the step therapy really helps to support members, safely, continue to support those who've achieved like the gains of using the medication and provide them with, an alternative where they can help to maintain the achievement on that medication. And if those have those, what I call the side effects, they're experiencing them, you don't have access to a PCP, CBA is able to step in to be able to provide that step-down therapy and provide them with the maintenance to support a lot of those members that are experiencing this. Because again, it's not just expensive. Members sometimes get off them because they couldn't tolerate the side effects, right? So CBA is really there to support those members, really to ensure that, what they achieved, it's really being supported and managed better.
Yeah, for sure. The cost of GLP-1s is such a big topic right now. Recently, one of our colleagues, Lesha Bouchak, our pharma editor, wrote a piece on whether, these drugs are accessible and affordable on a lot of these like direct-to-consumer platforms that pharma has out. So like Lilly Direct or Pfizer for All, and found that, even with insurance and even if they cut like the cost of these drugs by half, it's still more expensive than if you got it with insurance. And it's hard to navigate the cost of these drugs. So it's a really cool program that you guys have out. But, the GLP-1 space, it's huge and it's also so competitive. And you see even like big companies like Novo Nordisk kind of struggling to kind of stay in the space. And there's obviously a lot needed when it comes to addressing patient needs and evolving some of these therapies. You were talking about before this podcast recording, we had a conversation. You were mentioning that you guys also have conversations with pharma companies about how to improve access to some of these GLP-1 medications. Could you detail, what you guys are currently discussing and maybe some of the challenges, the most pressing challenges that pharma companies are facing in the GLP-1 space?
It's absolutely, you're spot on, right? So like you said, the costs are not sustainable. And secondly, the side effects is also one of the reasons why a lot of people stop or, don't continue with the medication. And, when you look at those two key elements, even employers and payers today are struggling with the cost, and they are now looking for what is the next opportunity? What can they do a little bit different? And a lot of them are actually looking to actually stop covering for some of those GLP. And then what do you think would happen to those members or patients? But to your question around the biotech space, the pharma space, what they're doing, and, where are the gaps? Today, I think I mentioned this earlier on. Once a patient stops, they need that ongoing support to sustain the progress. Pharma has the chances to really partner with platforms like what CBA has built today to provide and build an ecosystem that will deliver nutrition and need, that will provide behavioral changes, and as well as medical support after medication. This also extends the value of the drug, but helps patients feel successful. And this really helps to generate real world evidence on outcomes. But most importantly, when you build an ecosystem and there's a medication, there's a partner like SIBA as part of that helps the patients to support them from some of the side effects, but also to help to optimize, what they've achieved. You want to ensure that data that you're generating would allow you to also think about, when I talk about microdosing, a lot of them are beginning to think about personalization of the medication and how they prescribe them, right? Based on the specific patient data, so that takes into all that account and allow you to personalize it, but also most importantly, to really ensure that patients get the support. So a lot of them are really actually bringing solutions like SIBA into this ecosystem that they're building where, what they will offer patients is a combination therapy, which includes the lifestyle, behavior changes, nutritional guidance, medical support, and as well as the prescription medication as part of that ecosystem. And that will continue to help build trust and then help patients feel successful. And then this will also help to generate a lot of data that we can use to continue to enhance and improve the medication.
Yeah, for sure. Thanks for detailing all of that. And I did want to ask, what do you see the most in terms of what's the most common scenario for patients as they wean off GLP-1s, right? You were talking about this program kind of helping them deal with some of these side effects while they're on medication. But what typically happens to a patient after they're done their GLP-1 dose? What's the most common scenario that you see? And, why do you need programs to kind of support patients as they wean off?
Yeah, a lot of patients don't have anywhere to go, really, to be honest. And, if you look at today, the current healthcare model in the US today, there's a huge gap in access to a primary care provider. A patient who is getting off the GLP, who's experiencing side effects, where do they go? Either they go to the emergency room or they have to wait, a few weeks to get an appointment with a PCP. But if you can't get an appointment with a PCP and you're experiencing severe side effects, what do? You end up in the emergency room. You go to the emergency room. There's an additional cost for you. It's also inconveniencing for the patient. You go wait maybe 4 or 5 hours in the emergency room, right? And so some of the patients will either go on maybe Dr. Google, where they begin to search and see what can they do. If there's anyone who probably has shared similar experience based on the medication, the side effects they're experiencing, and that becomes a problem. So bringing a solution like SIBA into the mix and building that ecosystem would address a lot of the gaps in terms of, access to a virtual care platform that has doctors, dietitian, health coaches, at your convenience, right? So you just download an app, you go to the platform, you have access. Because if you can have access to PCP, what do you do next? And so we are there to bridge the gap, to provide access for those patients who probably don't know where to go. There are no materials there that they could that is readily available for them to either, educate themselves or get a direction or what to do. So this is why you see Lilly, Novo, all those bigger pharma who are in the GLP space are now creating that ecosystem to ensure that patients have a direction, if they experience any of those challenges, right, with this. So, and this is what SIBA is looking to fill, the access and the convenience, but also really the personalized care that is leveraging technology and that gives you readily available access.
Yeah, for sure. And you were talking a little bit about how there is that gap in education for patients, as they wean off some of these GLP-1 medications, and made me think a little bit about if you're a pharma marketer or a medical marketer in the space, this is a huge opportunity for you kind of to lean in and work with these companies, but also work with solutions like yourselves on educating the public, because there's so much focus on campaigns on, getting on GLP-1s, but not much that has really detailed what to do after. So what would you kind of say to medical marketers who are interested in understanding the space of the world post GLP-1 for patients, and how can they kind of leverage their resources in order to fill this gap?
Yeah, I mean, marketers have what I say can play a huge role in shifting the conversation. I think one of the important things there is instead of positioning GLP-1 as the whole solution, they can really frame them as part of the broader journey towards what I call metabolic health, right? That means educating the patients on what to expect, highlighting the importance of lifestyle support and showing how pharma can be a partner beyond just prescription. So I think it's important. And, if we're able to create that visibility, that awareness, educating our members, they really have a strong, big role really to help to shift those conversations.
And if you're not sure what to expect, post GLP-1, once you finish the treatment, what should patients expect typically to happen?
Well, I mean, it's a big question, right? But patients, suddenly, the expectation is this is the magic pill that's going to solve everything. And, unfortunately, we live in a society where people think they want a quick fix, right? Nobody wants to explore something that would take maybe more than 2, 3, 4 months to get results. So, and that's why most of them would just say, you know what, I want a GLP. And because they're not also aware or not educated on a lot of the challenges that come with this, or what are other supports there, the patients, sometimes they all confuse themselves, right? They just like, okay, I want to solve the problem. You want to solve a problem without thinking about what will be the impact of this if you begin to solve this problem, if you don't have additional support. So a lot of them are confused. So I think we need to begin to think about, what sort of, a lot of people pay attention to TV, right? They watch TVs and how the TV is like positioning this as like incredible solution. Maybe we need to think about how do we, the TV ads get restricted, in a way that it's really about precision engagement and really more digital campaign, which would really focus towards a physician education, patient communities. The goal is to meet patients where they are with more personalized, I think, credible information. It's less about mass awareness or more about meaningful engagement.
Yeah, for sure. And we're talking a little bit about managing expectations when you have a treatment like this, where there can sometimes be that perception if you are part of the patient population or the consumer market as well, that this is like a quote unquote magic pill when there's so much more that goes into it. And I mean, you touched on this a little bit, but definitely wanted to ask you, especially with the news coming out last week of there maybe being a little bit more of a crackdown on TV pharma ads. And we're seeing some of the effects now. Some pharma companies getting warning letters from the FDA about their TV ads, and kind of looking at some of these letters kind of details that, even though the ad has, a good message maybe, or a balanced message, it might be a little off because, it's a bit promotional in some ways, or doesn't necessarily outline some of the negative side effects of a treatment or a drug and all of that. And there's a lot of sensationalization when it comes to GLP-1s, especially with a lot of celebrities kind of being now tagged onto it. And so if you were talking to pharma marketers who work in that TV space, who work on these GLP-1 ads, what would you kind of tell them or impart on them when it comes to managing these expectations or advice on building out these ads?
Yeah, I think it's a very important questions, right? And we see that now happening because there's a lot more awareness in the society, in our communities. People are beginning to understand that this GLP itself, it's not the magic bullet that we everybody thought it is, right? And so I think once the restrictions are actually happening now, I think it's beginning to. It really should be about how do you engage patient? How do you really, provide education around how can this really support them and what's the alternative? Rather than, have more digital campaign, but we should focus on, one, physician education, two, the patient communities and create awareness there. And the goal is to meet patients really where they are, like I mentioned earlier on, right? And, when you meet them where they are, this would allow you to provide more personalized and credible information for individuals, either within the community, again, where you think most of the patients are a community that are most impacted with this. So it should really be less about awareness and more about meaningful engagement based on every individual unique situation, taking into account, the cultural perspective and again, some tradition too, right? So it shouldn't just be mass awareness. And I think that's really causing a lot of problems, without really taking into this, what I mentioned into account as you continue to really put this forward for patients to see, but creating an important channel where you meet them, where they are, and really identify their unique situation, looking at their data, and be able to use that as a means to, help support members to create those sort of awareness and education.
For sure. And just as kind of like a final question to round off this conversation, you mentioned a little bit about, physician engagement and education as well around this topic. And you said at Ciba Health, you guys also work with a lot of physicians who, advise patients as they're going through their GLP-1 journey and as they're weaning off. And from your perspective, where is physician education around GLP-1? Like, where is it at currently? And what is still missing when it comes to physicians understanding GLP-1s and how then they can advise patients?
It's an important question that you brought up, right? I mean, if you carry along the stakeholders, which is the physician, right? I mean, really, educating them on, what's available, and then how can they better manage some of these patients when they begin to experience a lot of these side effects, because then maybe also resources that other patient can leverage, because you're not looking at just the side effects or the cost. Sometimes it's not sustainable, even for employer or payer who are paying for it, but individuals too, right? Who probably opt to either pay. Obviously, when you go to an insurance, there's also maybe out of pocket, right? Are there any alternatives there that physician can point patients to, or members who are seeking this medication, and say, there's an alternative, let's try that? But the challenge with a lot of alternatives now, most of them are not clinically validated. So it's sometimes very difficult for a clinician to say, oh, I think there's a solution, maybe try this and combine this. When you look at the solution, it's either just pure marketing and there's no any data to substantiate a lot of claims, and it becomes a little bit difficult for you, right? So, and the patient themselves, when they go, most of them will just say, I want that medication. That's what I want, because they want a quick fix. So you have to really have a balanced approach when you have the clinicians, ensure that they educate the patient. I think it's beginning to happen now as compared to what it is maybe 1 to 2 years ago, where there's a complete lack of awareness of what this medication is, because the way it was actually, the way the TV ads makes us believe is, oh, this is incredible, it's going to solve all the problems for you. But when a patient begins to have challenges, then they begin to struggle. And then, you see a lot of them in the emergency room. So the physician's like, okay, what do we do here? What's the alternative today? So I think we need to do a better job of really saying, okay, there's no alternative. What you can explore first. If you're not improving, then maybe we can combine that with, the GLP. So the alternative could be some behavioral changes, lifestyle modifications. And really, because, if you continue to do on the path of the same lifestyle, same behavior, you expect a different result, it's almost impossible, right? So you want to ensure that patients understood that first, and then saying, okay, we'll try the medication. How about we try this for first 2 or 3 months, and then get a medication prescribed for you, and we start with a low dose, and then we'll continue to increase the dose based on, your data and how you are adjusting, right? So we can titrate again if you're doing better. And then once you get off it, we have something for you, maybe send you to a nutritionist and then a health coach, because behavior changes is so very difficult to do. And the way the system is set up today is you go see a PCP, and the PCP would say, okay, maybe go schedule an appointment with a nutritionist or a dietitian, right? And then the patient has to go start looking for that. And that nutritionist will not even have access to the data from, what the clinic, either the PCP has, right? So you need to build this comprehensive system where we're able to integrate and share data readily available for another person who probably is going to support you. Because, it has to be very comprehensive, multidisciplinary sort of care model, taking into account the clinical approach, but also the lifestyle behavioral support. And then, there are other patients that need hand-holding, right? You need like a health coach that can handle these patients. So you need to have this sort of ecosystem where all these people are all aligned and supporting members having access to the data real time and making informed decisions. So, this is the things that we need to begin to do. And I think it's beginning to happen now. But most importantly, we need to begin to have solutions that are credible, that has data, that supports whatever claims they make in terms of how they can help you achieve better behavior change, lifestyle modification, taking into account your unique situation and environment.
Yeah, for sure. Thanks so much for detailing that and, taking some time to chat a little bit more about the GLP-1 space. It was a great conversation. And hope to have you, back on the podcast at some point to discuss, more solutions around this or, what the updates are in the future. But really appreciate your take.
Yeah, incredible. Again, I'm always happy to share, what we're learning in the space. Obviously, as you know, it's shifting and moving very fast. Leveraging this technology, cutting edge technology, and how you combine that with a human to support patients. I think it's really important, and I'm happy to come back again and share additional insights and learnings in this space. So really incredible talking to you, and thanks for the opportunity.
AI is changing how we work, talk, and create. On November 13th in New York City, AI Deciphered, the next stage of your evolution, brings together the brands, platforms, and minds leading that shift. Presented by PR Week, Campaign US, and MM+M, this one-day summit breaks down what's working now and what's coming next. Hear how AI is reshaping media, marketing, and the retail experience, and find the tactics that fit your world. Register now at AIDecipheredSummit.com. Use promo code POD to save $100.
This is the part of the broadcast where we talk about what's trending in healthcare, and I don't think there's anything that's been bigger in our little section of the world than the presidential memorandum that came through last week aimed at DTC pharma advertisements. And essentially what a lot of people in the industry have been looking at is the first step in a crackdown, the potential for a ban. It's the first step and the first time that we've seen it in writing from the White House in terms of what the plan is. We can go through all of that. We also have some news that we're working on here in terms of the warning letters that have been sent out to drug makers. But I want to start with Steve, bringing you into the conversation. Just when that came through, you were down in Philadelphia at the conference. What was your reaction to just seeing that news come through that the Trump administration was taking their first steps on this front after months of people just kind of waiting for it to happen?
Well, I went down there, after looking at the agenda for Fierce, I thought okay, it's going to be all AI all the time. So all of my prep work had been done around getting ready to hear about AI and talk with people about it. And then this kind of Molotov cocktail went off Tuesday night. And then all of a sudden AI had been displaced. Think about that as a topic, AI being displaced. And this was all anybody was talking about. Every single session I sat through after that, not every single one, all but one, started with somebody referencing the presidential memorandum. And, the other thing is that quite a few people had to had to leave the conference and go back to corporate HQ to man the battle stations. So it really was highly, highly disruptive. But it was kind of interesting. It was good. It was good that the tribe had been gathered so that people could talk in real time about the implications for it, including a couple of panels that, had gone from probably being something that was like, yeah, I'd like to go listen to that one, to all of a sudden, oh man, Jim Potter from CHC is going to be here. I got to go to that one, which played to standing room only crowd.
Yeah, I talked with Jim that morning before he had his panel, and he had said that he's never been as popular in his life as he was, getting all the calls from journalists, interested stakeholders, all that sort of stuff. I think he was even wearing sunglasses at that panel to kind of embrace his new rock star mentality. I want to hop in, and bring Hira into the conversation because we put up a piece analyzing the presidential memorandum and basically what the go forward is for agencies. And here, you and I kind of heard a lot of similar stuff in terms of it is potentially a bombshell. It's potentially, to take Madden's metaphor, a Molotov cocktail. But in the near term, in the immediacy, there's really not much you can do or should change as it relates to DTC advertising? What did you hear from folks that you spoke with for that piece?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think a lot of the news was quite big and shocking to a lot of folks in the industry, but those kind of at the forefront of health communications and advertising were saying that, not to stop all your plans immediately when it comes to going forward with the ads that you have planned. Because it's a memorandum, it's not necessarily like a directive order. There's still some more steps that need to be taken in order for it to be, policy that is enforced. And that's what we've heard from folks at Avalier Health as well, who are talking about, ad strategy and how, pharma brands can just continue to do what they've been doing so far until they receive something, or we have more word on what kind of ads or companies or brands are receiving some of these warning letters that have been now directed to be issued by the FDA or HHS as well. Another interesting aspect is although there's this kind of directive to keep doing what you're doing ad-wise, when you're looking forward at your 2026 budgets, I think that's where, folks said, be a little cautious about how much money you want to spend into like laying out a really long-term ad plan, because things could change really quickly over the next few months. If some of these policies, are set in place and they're going to roll out, and that can disrupt a lot of things. So maybe shift to more nimble, agile kind of shorter ad plans for the beginning of next year until we hear more about what is about to happen.
Yeah, ultimately what you're talking about there, Hire, is the rulemaking process that this proposal is going to have to go through. And as I heard from a few people I spoke with for the story last week, the Trump administration does not have the best track record in terms of patience and follow through on the rulemaking process. You can look across a number of different health policies they pursued in the first administration and now in the second administration. So it's maybe not the advice that a lot of people in the industry want to hear in terms of just stay the course and keep with your plan, but it is also disruptive. I spoke with Zoe Dunn from Hale Advisors, and she pointed out the fact that like this coming in the early to mid part of September, when a lot of people are finalizing their budgets for 2026, really couldn't have come at a worse time. But I want to circle back on something you brought up, Hire, about these warning letters that we heard, and this is where I can bring Steve back in the conversation. We saw the announcement last week, and we were like, oh man, if we can just get our hands on one of those and see what's actually being said and what's being targeted. Matt, and you over the weekend got one. What is the upshot for our audience? You'll be able to read the story on the site by the time this goes live. But what's the upshot from the letter that you got a hold of?
The upshot is that you got to be wicked careful across all platforms. I think that a lot of times agencies might kind of optimize their compliance with laws for maybe broadcast television or cable television. And, what in fact, what you're creating is an omni-channel campaign, right? You need to make sure that whatever you're doing, your compliance needs to be optimized across every single channel that you're putting information out on. That's the upshot. And that includes, influencers. If you're working with influencers to get the word out about a product, you have to make sure that they're compliant too. Compliant enough that you're not going to get letters like this. And I think what this letter is not so much I don't want to give away too much because I want people to go online and read the story when it comes out, but it's not a full frontal assault on DTC advertising. But it's definitely coming in the side door and it's in there. So you have to be really careful, not just the spirit of the law anymore, the exact letter of the law.
And we'll include a link in our show notes to that story just to give our readers a little bit more insight in terms of it addressing AstraZeneca's Flu Mist at Home campaign, which launched last month. And it's interesting just on the level that this relates to a vaccine. Obviously, there are other letters that were issued out there, but just given where vaccine policy stands in this country, interesting that that's the focus. Lesha, I want to bring you in because you've been covering the health policy space for years now. And, we've talked ad nauseum on the show and even just offline about what a potential pharma DTC ad ban could look like. And this is obviously not that. And we've stressed that in all the pieces that we've put out there on the site, that it's not a ban, but it is restrictions, it's limitations. And like Steve talked about, it's the administration saying we're going to come after this in a very aggressive way, maybe not like how you were expecting it to be.
Yeah, one of the things that has stuck out to me as I've been reading through the HHS facts sheet and, Dr. Marty Makary, who's the commissioner of the FDA, his comments on this is that, the FDA and the HHS under Kennedy are framing DTC advertising as a public health crisis. I was reading Makary had posted a paper in JAMA, and he literally described advertising in pharma as a public health crisis. The HHS also provided like a list of reasons of negative impacts of DTC advertising over the years. And I think it's really interesting that the administration is framing it as that, because it seems to clash with pharma marketers who view their work as educating patients and empowering patients with more knowledge and information about potential treatments. A lot of the education they do around disease state awareness work as well. And I think Steve's point about influencers is also important, because more and more pharma companies have been working with influencers, and Makary and the HHS have stated they're planning on cracking down on social media posts and advertising as well. Makary specifically said that drug ads on social media are often presented as entertainment, and they blur the lines between editorial content and pharma advertising. So, social media is definitely going to be something that marketers will have to keep an eye on. I was also at Fierce Pharma Week, and I sat in on Dr. Mike's speech at the end of Wednesday. Dr. Mike is probably one of the most popular health influencers out there. He's done a bunch of partnerships with pharma over the years. And the first question posed to him as well was about the memorandum. And he says, it sounds scary, but he viewed it in a more positive light than maybe some other marketers at the conference reviewing it. He says he believes it might be an opportunity for pharma marketers to educate the public more about the, quote, miracles happening in modern science. I think it underscores this sort of distrust that the administration and the public has had in pharma over the years. And he said he doesn't think that pharma should shy away from conversations with people who view the pharma industry as evil. Instead, they can kind of work to get on the same page and say, hey, we are following these regulations. Drug advertising maybe isn't something that should be viewed as distrustful or misleading. He said he saw it maybe as a bit more of an opportunity. So there are, some different comments we're getting on this. It's tough to say right now how this might all play out in the legal realm as well, because we might imagine there might be some legal challenges post to these efforts. And you'll be able to read more about the warning letter, as Steve mentioned, on the website.
It's an interesting take from Dr. Mike on that one. Steve, what are your thoughts on that? I can see.
I was going to say I've always wondered why pharma doesn't come out swinging. Why, maybe that's a little too aggressive, but it's like, if you think about the effect that the vaccines had, right? And I know that's kind of the electric fence here, but if you think about the vaccines, all right, let's not even talk about vaccines. Let's talk about statins or high blood pressure medicine, right? Is there a way, if I were designing a campaign, I would figure out a way to say, this statin has extended the lives of 100 million people, and it's improved the quality of life of 200 million people. I'm just throwing these numbers out there. But to be able to quantify the effect, the positive effect of these medicines, let's call them what they are, okay? It's not just a manufactured product coming out of a factory. It's a medicine that helps people live better lives. Why don't you just say that? Why don't you just say that and say it in the artful way that we know our friends at the agencies can do? Just put it out there and, stub your cigarette out and you're done.
Yeah, and I don't know if it's just getting into semantics too much, but I think your point's really well taken, where it's like, I think a lot of these campaigns that we cover, and it's like using the words drugs, which obviously people can have their own connotations with, or treatments or medications. Like, if you really boil it down to medicines. And a lot of these, when they're at least talking to us as journalists, they're talking about it as these life-saving medicines that go towards X, Y, and Z patient population. But then when you see it on TV, it's like, okay, so where's that lost? Where it's like, my uncle is watching the football game yesterday and he's like, oh, it's Pluvicto, it's Opdivo, it's whatever. And they just, it gets lost there. So maybe this is that time for reassessment and pivoting. I would like to think that, again, to your point, the agency partners to be able to help them reorient that message that maybe they should have had years ago.
Yeah, I think the semantic point you bring up, Jack, is that medicine makes people think about illness. It's like, I need to take medicine when I'm sick. It's like, well, guess what? You have high cholesterol. That kind of is a chronic disease. So yeah, take your medicine.
Yeah, there's a lot of messaging coming out from the HHS saying, well, prescription drug usage has increased a significant amount since, 1997 when DTC advertising exploded from pharma. But that's also a misleading statement because these medicines are helping people. So pharma will need to kind of counter all of this messaging coming out of the administration over things like this.
One thing I think will be interesting too is it was listed in that letter, and I think it's something that Steve and I are going to be, pouring through in the piece that we're penning, is just even the style of it. There's this trope of, it's pharma advertisements, people dancing, at half speed in the middle of the street, or they're putting up string lights, or they're, obviously in two bathtubs overlooking a cliff or something. And that was something that was cited in this. And I was talking with Zoe from Hale Advisor. She's like, no, this ad for Flu Mist that AstraZeneca came out with, that Edelman was their partner for, it kind of has the beats and feels of an Apple commercial, which I think are probably some of the most consumer friendly, engaging ads that are out there. And you do wonder if there's going to be almost that chilling effect too, where it's like, nope, we got to go further even back on our playbook just because we can't lean too far in, because what if we get flagged by FDA or HHS for that? It's something I don't know if that's going to be the immediate impact, but it's in the back of these people's minds. They'd rather be safe than sorry on that front.
It's a great point. And to counter what I said earlier, part of the reason they don't come out swinging is there's a lot at stake.
It's a small C conservative industry with a lot of money at stake. And you can completely understand that, but it's also people's lives at stake too. If we're ultimately here for the benefit of patient outcomes, which is what every agency and brand that we speak with is talking about, you got to swing for the fences there. I don't think this is the time to suddenly become so much happier being in a cage. You have to be able to go out there and think outside the box and act outside the box too. We'll see how that all comes together.
Something like 3/4 of all HCPs in the United States now work for like larger organizations. They're not self-employed, right? And that means private equity, and that means more scrutiny about efficiencies, which is why the time with an HCP continues to decline, right? So, when the internet and DTC, which were sort of co-birthed, when it started, doctors were like, look, I hate people coming in with the reams of printouts from Dr. Google, right? About what their conditions are. Now they have less time. I think you're more likely to hear from HCPs that they like having an educated patient, right? They like when people come to them and say, I've done my research and here are my questions for you. And that's part of why prescription use has increased. People are better informed about their own care. And that's what everybody wants.
Although I'm sure there are some HCPs that would shudder if somebody walked in. They're like, I did my own research, and they go, oh my gosh, here we go again on that.
I did my research, and here are my questions. I think it's more.
That's a better way of engaging in that conversation. Is there anything else on this? I mean, it's obviously an early development in what's going to be something that plays out over the next weeks and months, but anything else that you think it's worth our audience knowing about?
Yeah, I think it's, everybody says stay the course. Nothing has changed, but this is an industry that like so many industries thrives and is optimized by planning, long range planning. And this makes it extremely difficult to plan anything long term, especially because you just don't know what's going to happen. But it's true with tariffs too, right?
Yeah, it's the other elephant in the room there. You got two elephants that you're dealing with, and you're just trying to make it to January 1st to see that budget enacted. So we'll see how we get there. It's going to be one of those things that, and I apologize to any of the PR or comms folks that are in our audience that have been trying to get pitches or stories in front of me. This is obviously going to take priority there. So if you see us kind of pivoting on that, please just understand how significant it is for the industry and how much we're going to continue to stay tuned on it as it proceeds from here. I want to thank you, the listener, for tuning in and listening to this wonderful episode and all these insights that me and my team have been able to bring. We'll be back next week with the next episode of the MM+M Podcast, joined by Publicis Health Media CEO Andrea Palmer and their Chief Investment Officer Brad Libo. Take care. The MM+M Podcast is produced by Bill Fitzpatrick, Gordon Thaler, Lesha Bushek, Ire Rickraj, and Jack O'Brien. Rate, review, and follow every episode wherever you listen to podcasts. And be sure to check out our website, mmm-online.com, for the top news stories on the pharmaceutical industry and medical marketing agencies.
The MM+M Media Summit returns to New York City on October 30th. Top voices in health media and pharma marketing will share what's working now and what's coming next. On the agenda, AI, retail media, personalization at scale, streaming, and the expanding definition of the point of care. We're talking strategy, consumer trust, and data privacy. What matters, what's moving, and what it means for you. Register at mmm-mediasummit.com. Use promo code PODCAST to save $100.